this agreement was signed yesterday between the All India Institute of Ayurveda and the College of Medicine in the United Kingdom. At the same Science Museum event, the Prime Minister also met a number of personalities who constitute a living bridge between India and the UK in various fields. And this is in fact a phrase which our Prime Minister coined in 2015 to symbolize the fact that there is a group of people in both countries which are living and working and which constitute a living bridge in exchanges between the two countries and which in a sense spans the entire relationship as it has evolved over the last 70 years since India's independence. The Prime Minister also paid a floral tribute at the Basareshwara statue, which is on the banks of the Thames across Westminster. And then this afternoon, we are just returning from the event at the Crick Institute, where again Prime Minister was received by Prime Minister May. And of course, as you know, the Crick Institute is a leading centre for medical research. So Prime Minister May showed Prime Minister Modi cutting-edge research which is being done on cancer as well as on malaria. And Prime Minister May also spoke to a number of researchers, many of whom are Indian nationals. Both of the Prime Ministers then attended a technology demonstration and also launched the India-UK Tech Alliance and met a number of young technology entrepreneurs at this event. While at the Crick, both Prime Ministers also addressed the CEO Forum. On the Indian side, it is led by Shri Ajay Piramal, on the UK side by Mr. Jerry Grimstone, head of Standard Life UK. And the Prime Minister will shortly be having an audience with Her Majesty the Queen. And then to close the day, he will interact in a diaspora event in about an hour and a half, which is Bharat Ke Baat Sabke Saath. And then, of course, the official dinner to be hosted by the Prime Minister of the UK. Let me very quickly go over the main issues covered in the meeting between Prime Minister May and Prime Minister Modi. And I will have to be a bit brief because of time. The first issue covered was trade and investment. Of course, they had a fairly wide-ranging discussion on a number of issues that included both bilateral issues and international issues. Under trade and investment, both Prime Ministers were satisfied that a joint trade review had been held, and Prime Minister May spoke of the keenness of the United Kingdom to have an FTA, or at least to begin FTA negotiations, free trade agreement negotiations with India. Prime Minister said that we are ready to do so, and Prime Minister also emphasized that it needs to be a balanced agreement and it needs to be an agreement which has mutual benefit in it. The Prime Minister of Great Britain assured our Prime Minister that during this implementation period, the period between the UK leaving the European Union and that is until the end of 2020, Indian companies would continue to enjoy the same benefits as before Brexit. This was important for us, and the Prime Minister gave this assurance to our Prime Minister. In the context of trade and investment, our Prime Minister also raised the question of easier mobility for Indian professionals and others, citing their contribution to the economy of the United Kingdom. These are visa issues, work permits and so on. Prime Minister May acknowledge the contribution that Indian companies and professionals are making. We are in fact the second largest job creator among foreign countries, and we will continue to discuss this issue further. The Prime Minister also spoke of the continuing importance of London as a financial centre post-Brexit in the context of Indian companies continuing to use London and the London Stock Exchange. And the Prime Minister welcomed the investor response for the masala bonds which have been floated on the London Stock Exchange. And as you would know from the joint statement which has been released, the Global Green Energy Fund, about £120 million each of the two countries will put in there, with additional funds to be raised on the London Stock Exchange, which will be used for funding green projects, renewable energy and so on, which is a new initiative and which both governments consider important in the current priorities that they have on climate action. The second issue that was discussed was the issue of terrorism and radicalism. The Prime Minister described extremism, radicalism, terrorism as a rising challenge for both countries and for countries across the globe, and of the need to strengthen the already good cooperation between the two countries. And it was agreed that one area where we need to enhance cooperation substantially is in the cyber security field. As the two Prime Ministers discussed, this is a continuing dynamic process, because when you deal with a cyber threat, within hours that solution is overtaken by some other cyber problem. And therefore there was a need for a dynamic cooperation between the two countries. It was important for us when Prime Minister May also said that on the issue of terrorism, Britain stands as a strategic partner with India and is ready to expand cooperation. There was also an iteration on the part of the British Prime Minister of the keenness of the UK to have greater defence cooperation with India. The issue of economic offenders was also raised, and this was among a number of consular issues that were raised. I have already covered the issue of mobility of professionals and students and the like. And views were also exchanged on current international and multilateral issues. And in this regard, it's important to note that both Prime Ministers agreed that a rules-based international order should be preserved in today's interconnected world, that we should respect the United Nations, the multilateral system, and have a rules-based international order. I'd like to request my colleague, High Commissioner, if he wishes to add any further details either to that meeting or to the subsequent programs on which he will be able to say some words. Thank you.
Thank you, Foreign Secretary. I think the Foreign Secretary has been quite detailed in describing what has happened at the visit of the Prime Minister. I just wanted to reiterate one thing on the technology side. The Foreign Secretary referred to the demonstration at the Crick Institute. There is considerable importance being attached by both sides to technology, innovation, and R&D. And these tech initiatives have been, and if you recall that when Prime Minister May went in November 2016, there was a tech summit held in Delhi. And now there is an announcement that another tech summit may be held in the autumn of 2018. This UK-India Tech Alliance that was announced today includes an agreement between NASSCOM and Tech UK. But those details I'm sure you will get on that. Of course, there were some announcements from the UK side. They wanted to create a UK-India tech hub in India and UK-India tech cluster partnerships, Pune being one city being identified as a possible hub, then an advanced manufacturing center, and lastly the FinTech Rocket Ship Awards. As you're aware, there has been some cooperation in the FinTech sector. London and the City of London is particularly strong in that. So I think this would further supplement the very wide-ranging cooperation that exists between our two countries. Yes, stop it. Thank you.
Thank you, Foreign Secretary. Thank you, High Commissioner. We have time for this. Okay,
sorry. The CEO's Forum that the Foreign Secretary touched upon. You know, the CEO's Forum is a very important mechanism where we get leading businesses from either side to discuss amongst themselves and come up with recommendations for the governments, in fact, for the prime ministers of both the countries. And considerable importance has been attached to these meetings. So at the Crick Institute itself, the two prime ministers heard a presentation, a report from both the co-chairs, Jerry Grimstone and Mr. Ajay Piramal, and then responded to the points raised by the two sides, the groups of CEOs. And it's important because these are people on the ground who face issues or come up with suggestions which are very relevant. So I think a lot of importance has been attached to that, considering that our economic and commercial partnership is actually quite good, particularly our investment partnership. They are one of the largest investors, UK into India, the fourth largest investor, and we are the third largest investor here. So it's a cross-cutting relationship, and there's a lot of importance being paid to enhancing this partnership on the economic and commercial side. So there was some discussion on that, and both the Prime Minister responded with their views on suggestions made and agreed to follow up on recommendations made by the CEOs. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The Foreign Secretary of India briefing the media on the key takeaways and the expectations from the ongoing visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in London. Crucial areas that had been highlighted by the leaders that have come up for discussion or are expected to be on agenda as far as the Indian Prime Minister's ongoing London visit is concerned. One of the areas focuses on trade and investment, which has been a focal point of many of those deliberations and engagements as well. Throughout the day, one of the events was the CEOs Forum that has been strongly discussed as being one of the areas where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the CEOs of both the countries have engaged and discussed various ways to enhance the cooperation in the fields of trade and investment between India and the UK. Let me also go straight across now to Kevin McCall, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the UK-India Business Council. He has coordinated the work of the team across the UK and the Indian offices of the UK-India Business Council. Good evening, Kevin. Appreciate very much you're speaking with us here on WION. It's been a crucial visit, but more importantly, when it comes to the issues of trade and investment, UK and India finding common ground, various issues of convergence. What have been the main focal areas that the deliberations so far have focused on?
Molly, good evening. Pleasure to be speaking to you this evening from here in London. We've just finished the CEO Forum meeting, maybe 30 minutes back. The Prime Ministers and the CEOs have more or less just left the building. And I have to say, that's a fantastic discussion. You know, the CEOs were there for 2 hours in a hugely positive meeting between 40 top British and Indian CEOs. And I think it was positive for 3 reasons. I think, first, it was like a reunion of old friends. These UK and Indian business leaders know each other very well. The UK, invests, substantially in India. Number 1 G20 investor in India, employing about 800,000 people. Similarly, the Indians are always in the top 2, 3, 4 investors in Britain, employing about 110,000 people. So that everyone knows each other very well. I think it was also a really positive meeting because people were on a bit of a high because the recommendations from the last meeting, some of them have actually been implemented by the governments. For example, on visas, the Forum have been calling for some time for more Indian students to come to the UK. And last year, 2017, the number of Indian students coming to the UK increased by 28%. And also, throughout last year, Indians received more work visas to come to the UK than every other country in the world combined. So on visas, the CEO Forum were very happy that progress had been made. We're also very happy that the Prime Minister's announced today a UK-India tech partnership. The Forum has been advocating for quite some time that there's huge potential for both the UK and India to do a lot more together on innovation. And they were also positive because there's so much potential in the relationship to grow trade, to grow the bilateral investment, and to do much more co-creation of innovation and technologies between both countries. So a really good meeting, and everyone left feeling very positive and looking forward to the next one.
Indeed, you speak of the potential that both the countries really have. But Kevin, when it comes to the sticking points around the areas of job creation, for instance, many have been wondering what are the measures that the UK and India CEOs are planning to take when it comes to that area?
Okay, I think there was 2 parts of the discussion today that touched on how to create, jobs and prosperity in both countries. And there's a real recognition that there's a huge amount of talent in the UK and in India. Some fantastic SMEs, some really strong startup ecosystems in both countries. So the Forum we're talking today about how we can create, a bridge, a living bridge, virtual incubators where British startups and SMEs and entrepreneurs could connect with partners in India, entrepreneurs, startups and venture capitalists from both countries. And by creating those bridges where you bring entrepreneurs, wealth creators, job creators together, that's where we can think we can take those small companies, those startups, and help them to scale up to become the wealth creators and the job creators of the future. So that was one area. Linked to that, there was also a real desire from the industry leaders to collaborate more with universities and research institutions. And again, it was great to see one of the announcements made today that there'll be new partnerships between tech clusters in the UK and tech clusters in India. One of them, which particularly excites us at the UK India Business Council, because we've done some work on this, is creating a partnership between the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, which is part of the University of Sheffield, and linking that to the manufacturing cluster in Pune. So you've got Make in India and expertise in the UK that can help create new technologies for the future and new jobs for the future in both countries, looking at electronic vehicles, autonomous vehicles, new lighter materials that can revolutionise fuel consumption and automotive industry in the future. So it was really a great session, buzzing with ideas and lots of positivity.
Indeed. Stay with me, Kevin, if you can, please, and appreciate those points coming in from Kevin McCall, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the UK India Business Council. This is the CEO's Forum that has just concluded moments ago. One of the focal areas and the points of convergence being the areas of trade and investment. As Kevin was pointing out, the Make in India campaign of the Indian government also coming up for discussion. A joint trade review being undertaken by both the sides, also an important initiative which is deemed to secure quicker wins. I also want to get in our London Bureau Chief, Mandy Clark, who's been closely monitoring the minute-by-minute developments coming in from London as a part of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's ongoing London visit. Mandy, hi. According to you, what are you picking up on the major takeaways from that recently concluded, from that just concluded CEO's Forum that took place?
Well, I'm currently in the town hall where the delegates are. That's why there's a lot of people milling about. But I think the big takeaway that certainly the people are talking about is that link with business and technology. And on top of that is that terror link going hand in glove. The technology one that really shows the assets of both Britain and India and how they can work more closely together in business to help develop and teach each other their own specialties. So certainly that was a talking point that I've heard people take away from that joint statement. But there's certainly a lot of excitement here. A lot of delegates milling about, looking forward to when Narendra Modi addresses the diaspora in a couple of hours from now. The queue was absolutely huge. People were standing around the corner just to get in early. So it's expected to be very much a full house where he's going to take questions from the audience and also from social media.
Indeed, it's been a power-packed Wednesday, to say the least, Mandy. A host of engagements, many of them remain to be undertaken by the Indian Prime Minister. One of the crucial engagements also will be his holding audience with the Queen.
Yes, he has already met Prince Charles. He's been hosted in Buckingham Palace to meet with the Queen. We're not sure what will be discussed. It's unlikely that any trade talks will be discussed, but the Queen always has great affection for India and personally invited him to visit her in his very packed schedule. So after that, then he's coming to speak to diaspora, and after that he has dinner with Theresa May. He has had already 2 meetings with her today, so he's certainly a man in demand in London.
Stay with me, Mandy. I want to also bring back Kevin onto the conversation. As we were discussing, Kevin, the joint trade review that's being undertaken by both the sides is an important initiative. The UK India Business Council also has stressed on the importance of that move. But as many have been saying, the UK India Free Trade Agreement will boost trade, but will also take its own time to reap benefits.
That's absolutely right, Molly. There will be time. It will be time before a UK-India a UK-India trade agreement discussions start, and even longer before they're concluded. And we tell businesses don't wait for a joint for a UK-India trade deal. There's business to be done now, but there are also some barriers that are stopping the UK-India trade and investment relationship achieving its potential. And that's what the Joint Trade Review is looking at. It's what are those quick wins that the governments can discuss between each other that will unlock future and faster growth in the trade and investment relationship. And I mentioned at the start of our discussion the huge positivity, because a lot of the people in the room are old friends. And when you're in a room with old friends, you can be honest with each other. And there were some points that were brought up on those.
We've lost that line with Kevin there, but as he was just mentioning, the India-UK trade partnership that's also being announced by the British government to mark Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit, coming with a huge boost for the country's economy. UK's Department for International Trade has said a range of new Indian investments worth more than £1 billion will create or safeguard more than 5,700 British jobs for the economy as part of that new partnership. Another key area is that of trade and investment, as Kevin was just pointing out. I want to also go back across to Mandy. The issues and the areas of trade and investment have been stressed upon repeatedly, Mandy, as also the issue of job creation. More than 5,700 jobs are expected to be created as a result of this new partnership that was announced by British Prime Minister.
Yeah, it's certainly a big shot in the arm to have that boost in jobs. And it's at a time when Britain, it's put in perspective, is really looking to really bolster its relations with India in the backdrop of Brexit, where they are essentially losing that European Union trading bloc. They're looking to historically on it, the commonness, what they have in common. And India has so much in common with Britain. That's where they want to deepen these trade relations. It's already been a benefit with these job figures that are being forecast. So certainly Britain will see this as a big victory, the bilaterals so far.
Let's just also take a step back and look at the several engagements that the Indian Prime Minister has had there in London, Mandy. There was a stroll at the Science Museum with Prince Charles. There was also the meeting that he's had with the CEOs. He's going to be holding an audience with the Queen there. And also, lastly, will be engaging with members from the Indian community there. Where you are at the moment, what's the buzz like? What are people telling you?
There's a lot of excitement. There are delegates here. Priti Patel is moving about. She's an Indian origin member of the UK Parliament. There's lots of people, not necessarily celebrities, but certainly in stature, very keen to listen to Prime Minister Modi. But more than that, it's the diaspora. It's the average British Indian person just looking forward to connect. We've seen groups of people celebrating Modi's arrival from 8 in the morning. And just to get into this event, the queue was around the corner. It took over an hour. This is well before he's due to speak. So there's certainly a lot of excitement about him coming, and also his connection to the diaspora really matters to a lot, that he actively engages with them and they feel valued. They feel like they can contribute back. So it seems like a very loving relationship between the diaspora and the Prime Minister.